Hello, I'm Terry Barclay, the president and CEO of Inforum and chair of the Sustainable Business Network of Detroit. And I'm really excited for today's conversation with Wafa Dinaro. So let me just tell you a little bit about Wafa's background. And I'm hoping she will tell us more. But she is the executive director for the New Economy Initiative, a project of the Community Foundation for Southeast Michigan. And in this role, she leads the program and grant-making activities for entrepreneur-based donors of the Community Foundation. And she has just been a pro in cultivating public support for inclusive entrepreneurship and small business development and related activities. And prior to this role, Wafa's had such a huge impact already on our region that is continuing in her current role. But before she stepped into the role at NEI, she directed economic development for Wayne County, and her responsibilities were just huge. And I hope she's going to tell us a bit about those, including oversight and execution of all of Wayne County's economic development activities and initiatives, including business attraction, retention and expansion programs, small business, and of course, entrepreneurial support. And she's held a variety of other positions in the public and private sectors over the years that have really made her seasoned in developing partnerships and innovative solutions between business and government. So I think that we're in for a really good conversation today. So Wafa, what else can you tell us about you?
Thanks, Terry. So I think that was a really good introduction, and I think the most important thing is I love our region. I love Detroit, the Southeast Michigan, and I love our state. And as we kind of look at the future of where Michigan is going, I really think we have so much more potential to grow and thrive and become a place where people want to live, work, and play. And I'm really excited to be a part of that. I think that's really the most encouraging part about my job is that, I'm really looking at the region holistically and helping people plant seeds, become entrepreneurs, and really thrive in this region and make us the best that we can be.
And can I just say thank you for that perspective? For those of our listeners who haven't had a chance to spend time with you, that sense of optimism and possibility is palpable when anyone is with you. So thank you for bringing that and sharing that with all of us. So talk to us a little bit about the mission of NEI.
Yeah, NEI has been around since 2007, and we really were supposed to be a short-term program. The initial intention of NEI was to put $100 million in a bucket and try and diversify the economy, try and really look at bringing in new industries into Southeast Michigan. As the saying goes, when the United States gets a cold, Michigan gets the flu in economic terms. And initially it was, how can we diversify our economy so it's not so anchored in auto, and how can we make it so that we can weather the storm a little bit better? And as we kind of talked through some of the economic strategies and worked through and brought some partners into the region to attract different industries, we really started to look at where the gaps were. And we realized that there was a really big missing portion in entrepreneurship support, specifically in really small startup entrepreneurs and the brick and mortar neighborhood businesses. And we all know that those neighborhood businesses are anchors and really keep a neighborhood intact and keep a neighborhood walkable and keep people in those neighborhoods. And it's really a pillar in a lot of neighborhoods. And we really have been working to find the magic formula to how to support those businesses and make sure that they're thriving and able to reach their full potential so that they can hire people, they can expand, they can scale, and really continue to grow our economy. We see economic development not as going out and attracting the big company that's going to bring 100 jobs, but we see economic development as, how do we plant the seeds here in Michigan? How do we find that next unicorn, that next Ford Motor Company, that young man or woman who has an idea? How do we give them all the tools to succeed here so that they can hire the 5 people and then 10 people and then grow to 50, 100, and maybe become the next big Fortune whatever company in our area.
And again, I just have to say kudos to you and to the founders of the initiative, because my sense is that we're always saying a lot, kind of saying a lot of good things about small business, but translating that talk into action, because that really is where the jobs are. That really is where the growth is. And it's complicated, right? I mean, if there were an easy button, as they say, someone would have pushed it by now. For how do you? So I think you really take a very holistic view of what it takes to help support.
And we are, as a region, we're incredibly lucky and blessed that we have all these family foundations here that were at one point entrepreneurs, and they understand and value entrepreneurship and are willing to invest in the next generation of entrepreneurs. And really, this is like NEI as a whole is an investment in entrepreneurs. We believe that entrepreneurship creates generational wealth. It'll create economic mobility. It'll create a more robust, diverse region. And that's what we want. And our funders have the same vision. And we've been very lucky that they continue to support us and believe in our model, which has now become, it's become a national model. What NEI has done is now being replicated in other places because it's been so successful, and because this is what needs to happen in every region and every state across the country.
Well, congratulations on that. And could you maybe talk a little bit, because I know that your roots are at the Community Foundation. Can you talk a little bit about that relationship?
Yeah, so the Community Foundation is our umbrella support organization. The Community Foundation is a public charity that supports really almost everything under the sun. They support a vast range of grant making and programs, but there's a couple staple programs within the Community Foundation. My program, the New Economy Initiative. There's also the Michigan Justice Fund that looks at criminal justice reform across the state. And there's a couple other programs within the Community Foundation that work on very specific initiatives to really move the needle and be able to support, in my case, entrepreneurship, economic mobility, generational wealth, and really to support those programs. But the Community Foundation of Southeast Michigan is probably one of the best kept secrets of our region. There's so much incredible work that happens in the Community Foundation, support for the arts, support for green spaces and entrepreneurship, and really any support for programming for children. Like the list goes on and on, scholarships, and it's an incredible organization, and a lot of that work gets done very silently and quietly behind the scenes.
And grounded again in the donors who have given resources to make that programming happen, which you're right, it's a often hidden gem. I'm curious, I know that NEI has a sustainability program or set of goals in terms of working with small businesses that you support. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, and when we look at sustainability, I always say we kind of look at it from, the environmental responsibility aspect, but also from, the long-term sustainability of a business, making sure they're around for a long time. And there's a couple different ways for a small business to implement sustainable practices. Environmental responsibility can be anything from minimizing the environmental impact, such as conserving energy, reducing food waste, changing their packaging, and all of those things are essentially cost savings. Will save them money. For a restaurant to learn how to store their food and change the way that they're serving food so that they're serving less, so there's less waste, is all ends up saving them on their bottom line. We also really want businesses to start looking at consumer preferences. And again, we talk a lot about the way we package goods, because packaging is not only harmful to the environment, but packaging costs money. And the more packaging that you put on a product, the more money it's costing the business. And how do we minimize the packaging so it's a win-win environmentally and for the bottom line? And really, we want small businesses specifically to understand the benefits of implementing sustainable practices and to be able to implement those. And sustainability doesn't always mean adding expensive energy efficient products or putting solar panels on your property. It could be something as simple as reducing how much water you're using or changing the way you package or prepare foods.
That is such a great point, because the number one objection or concern that I hear, and perhaps you do as well, when you're talking to businesses about sustainability, is they immediately see dollar signs. What is this? And it's almost accepted that sustainability is going to cost more. It's sort of like this built-in assumption. And so I'm really curious about how you go about funding or supporting people's thinking, broadening their thinking about this and their approaches to that in the small business world.
Yeah, right now we're really focused on the sustainability of the actual business. How do we implement technical assistance programs to make sure the businesses are doing just the work to keep their business alive, that they know how to do their finances, they know how to do their projections. And once they have the basics, once they know how to analyze all of their books, they can look and see, okay, this is costing us this much. How do we reduce this to save ourselves money and ultimately become more sustainable? What we never want to say out loud is people become entrepreneurs, people get into small business to make money. And we want to make sure that they're making money, because that's what it's all about. We keep talking about generational wealth, and we want businesses to be profitable. We want businesses to scale, to grow, and we want them to make money. We want them to hire employees, and we want them to really be explosive and become, staples in every single community.
Wow. Well, I love that because again, it's taking these abstract ideas, of generational wealth and saying, you know what, it is about making money. It is about building the kind of businesses that turn into the businesses that are funding these initiatives as they grow in their success. So I'm wondering if you have found any new sustainability models or particular best practices that you're encouraging?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And as far as environmental sustainability practices, we have not found an ideal model yet. It's kind of a work in progress that we're working through, but I don't have the blueprint for you just yet. And I'm hoping that we will at some point, but as NEI kind of works through what's working in our small business ecosystem. We're always kind of trying new ways and seeing what works and what doesn't work. And, like you kind of touched on this, we want to make sure our ecosystem is supported holistically, and that, the ones that are funding us right now, that we're supporting our future funders who will support the next round of entrepreneurs in 10, 20, 30 years. And we're hoping NEI doesn't need to be around that long, but we want to make sure that the small business support is here to stay.
So is that what inspires you personally at NEI? Or, can you share maybe a little bit about what gets you out of bed in the morning? What the inspiration is?
Yeah, I mean, I started this conversation saying how much I love this region. I really, I love where I live. I think we have a lot of room to grow and make it better. And that's my inspiration every day is I get to support entrepreneurs who are passionate, have amazing ideas, and just need a little bit of support to make their business successful. And if we can provide that little bit of support, I always say, especially with these small entrepreneurs, there's a little bit of luck in there, but there's a lot of really good ideas. And a lot of times you see that success because the person has that rich uncle or that rich, parent. How do we bridge that gap? So somebody who doesn't have that rich uncle and has an incredible idea, has an incredible drive, how do we get them to get access to capital? How do we get them the access to the resources that they need so that they can take their idea and realize their dream?
Right. So that kind of leads, it's probably a good segue to our next question, which is, we talked about what gets you out of bed in the morning, what the inspiration is, what keeps you up at night, what do you see as some of the big challenges of the next 5 to 10 years?
That's a really good question. And there's a lot of challenges that NEI is working to address, but there's also a lot of regional challenges that we just don't have the capacity to address. I think the number one issue facing our region is transit, like a cohesive regional transit system where, you can get from downtown Detroit to the airport or to Ann Arbor or Macomb County or wherever it is in a reasonable amount of time, and have one transit system that kind of talks to each other and is reliable. I think that's a really big overarching problem that's facing our region, and I think that keeps a lot of economic development opportunities out of our area. I mean, another big challenge is climate change. As the climate continues to change, I think we are going to be getting, as a region, as a state, we're going to be getting a lot of climate refugees. How do we prepare for that? And how do we make sure we are setting ourselves up in the long term with, housing, infrastructure, all of that comes to be able to take advantage of the people that are relocating, the businesses that are going to relocate, and how do we make Michigan the place for climate refugees?
Interesting. If someone asks me what is the number one thing that I hear from companies, for me, it's around talent. Having the right talent shortages, that it's at a growth limiting level, right? The level of concern about that. But I think it's easy to see how that's very related to the topics that you just brought up, right? It's all a system. Yeah.
And I think it's all connected. I think people, especially as we're remote, we're talking from 2 different locations right now. People you can have a lot of jobs now and live anywhere. And we have to make Michigan the place where people want to live, which means more access to green spaces, more walkability, more bikeability, And we have to make it more like, we have to look at economic development more holistically, and less about let's, put a factory here and, bring the jobs.
Specific deal. Yeah.
Yeah, the environment has changed and jobs are changing, and we really have to start to look at more placemaking, economic development. How do we support main streets? How do we support walkability? How do we ensure people want to live here and can thrive and be successful here?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. So, Wafa, one of the things that I'm curious about, I know that NEI has been really diligent in commissioning economic and employment impact reports and surveying entrepreneurs, actually doing some deep listening to entrepreneurs about what their attitudes are regarding the resources available to them in the region. Could you talk a little bit about that? How has that impacted both the reception and response to NEI's work, and also the accountability that you place on yourself about your work?
We place, we're willing to change the way we do things. And like any organization, we try things. Sometimes they work really well and sometimes they don't work. And we are always willing to pivot. And a lot of our listening sessions, a lot of our learnings, all of our data collection is all to drive, what are we doing well? How do we continue to do what we're doing well? Or how do we pivot and listen? And one of the things that we've continually tried to do is how do we communicate all of the resources that are available through the NEI network to those that need it? And we haven't done it really well. I mean, there's still such a huge gap, and we're continuing to improve that, and we're continuing to work through that. And it's, how do we find one resource, one place to access all the resources, and how do we make it so it's user friendly and it's doable? And it's always a work in progress, and we're always making changes and tweaking it. And we have to continue to change and to adjust and to meet business owners where they're at, because otherwise we become irrelevant and stagnant. And we want to make sure we're useful and we have our finger on the pulse. And we've built a small business ecosystem, and the way we look at our ecosystem is we look at it in kind of 3 different buckets. We have our capital providers, those that will provide grants and loans to small businesses. We have our practical assistance or technical assistance providers, those that will do the classes and teach you how to do your books, how to do your accounting, teach you, look at your lease to make sure you're getting into a good lease, and do some of that very high touch work. And then the 3rd bucket is what we call trusted connectors, those that are the community development organizations that know the neighborhood, the different language speaking organizations that can speak and culturally, in a culturally appropriate way, talk to business owners and connect them with the right resources that they need. And when we look at it holistically, we're always looking at where are the gaps, where do we need to fill gaps, where do we need to find partner organizations to help. And we look at all of this, and how does a small business owner navigate this? Do they go to Access in Dearborn and talk to somebody in Arabic and they get connected with a support system? Do they go to Global Detroit? Do they, go to Tech Town? Like, what is their entry point, and how are they navigating the ecosystem as a whole? And we're always working to improve their journey through the ecosystem and make sure that the outcomes that they're getting, if they want to start a business, that by the time they get through the system, that they've either started their business or realized that this isn't for me and maybe I need to change things.
I have often reflected, and I've talked with many small business owners. It's just so overwhelming. And I think the other thing is that you can be doing an outstanding job of communicating, but it's like for any of us as we move through our lives, you don't even pay attention. You don't, it's like, it's not until the moment that you need something that you start paying attention and start trying to figure out how you find it or figure that out. So it is a daunting challenge, and I really applaud your continued focus on it. And I think it's fabulous, the multiple entry points and pathways that you've built, and that there's always help and support is always available. It's just a question of being persistent in finding it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other aspect of that is really, we don't talk a lot, as in philanthropy, we don't talk a lot about policy, but we've really been focused on advocacy for some policy changes to make navigating the processes, the red tape for small businesses easier. When a business needs to register as minority owned or women owned, it's a process. And how do we work to streamline that? How do we, until we can make that process easier, how do we hold the hand of the small business owner and walk them through that process and make it just a little bit easier for them to navigate? Because it's difficult for anybody, but if English is your second language, or if you don't have access to reliable internet, those challenges are so much more difficult, and it's so much more difficult to navigate.
Absolutely, that's absolutely true. So, Wafa, there may be something that you want to bring up that we haven't covered. I know that one of the closing questions that I have for you is a broad one. It's what do you view as the role of sustainability for the future of Detroit and this region and state that we care so much about?
Yeah, that's a really good question and a really broad question. And I see the role of sustainability as looking at our region as in 20, 30, 50 years, looking at it as a place that people want to live, are healthy, have access to clean water, have access to green spaces, have walkability. I keep talking about walkability because, places that have that score high on the walkability index tend to have better health outcomes, tend to have better economic outcomes. It's all kind of interconnected, and we don't talk enough about the interconnectivity of economic development and health and the environment. I mean, it's all connected, and we have to do a better job of looking at how we build out our communities and how we support our communities holistically, and look at making our region a place where people want to be and want to stay, and where college kids graduate and say, I'm going to plant roots here, and this is where I'm going to stay, and this is where I'm going to grow my business, or this is where I'm going to grow my career.
It feels like sometimes it feels like we have all of the building blocks. We have every single one of them.
Yes.
You talked about being a climate refuge state. Good grief, water. I mean, so many of the elements are here. World-class universities, a terrific workforce, wonderful communities where you can have a wonderful family experience. It's all here, and it feels like we need, well, I don't know, I admire and want to say thank you for your efforts to weave all of those together in a way that's going to take us to our future. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Terry. I really appreciate this conversation.
Yeah. It's wonderful to be with you. So, Wafa, thank you again for sharing your time and your insights and everything that you're doing at NEI in terms of sustainability and for Southeast Michigan and for the city of Detroit. Thanks.
Thank you. Have a good one.
You too.
Thank you for tuning in to the Sustainable Business Network Detroit, the Green Stream podcast. Remember to like, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure to follow us on sbn-detroit.org and stay tuned for more conversations on sustainability from inside and around the city.